So diving into the topic a little bit more today with programming, and then how do we look at that? How do we construct it in terms of online training? I often get asked a lot of questions as it pertains to the programming aspect of things when we're training athletes or high, low level, whatever it is, anything in between. How do we train, program, and elicit those responses as it pertains to performance? The question today is really just in reference to general population, people that may not have really detailed specific levels of performance that they have to achieve, but we're looking at some of these qualities that we need to have for increased function and quality of life. So really the first thing that we start with is, well, how often do I even train? Obviously, a lot of these are going to be generalizations, but 3 days a week puts you in a pretty good spot. You know, you're not going really longer than 72 hours. If you have kind of a work, rest, and then take the weekend off, you can construct those either way. Not saying that you couldn't do a little bit more or less, but that's where I would start. Okay, the focus for some of the training that we would be providing is it has all these different aspects in it. So there's a high level of thought and intention to everything that we're doing, even if it is general population. I'd say first and foremost is the injury prevention. These are all the things that people never do and that they really should and they need to. So we just program those things in so that we have increased function. The issues in the areas that we generally see is people have low back issues, they have knee, hip, and shoulder. So understanding that the pelvis drives everything, and then we see issues upstream or downstream, we're certainly looking at the function of the hip. Most is for lacking internal rotation, and those are things that we can and will program to try to navigate around that. So being able to strengthen all the muscles that cross over said joints is going to create more stability about those joints. So those things are programmed in, whether it's within the training or it kind of serves of a twofold purpose as warming up the body and then prehabilitative in nature. So navigating around the injury prevention is huge because there's really two things that have a halt to your progress in training where you start to hit those plateaus is sickness and injury. Okay, so as long as you guys are training and resting and eating and all those things, you're not allowed to get sick, and then injury, we can try to reduce that risk. Okay, so function I talked about a little bit already, but then one thing that I think about is anytime you're putting force into the ground, it's from the ground up. And the first thing and the only thing that contacts the ground are your feet. So what are we doing to restore proper function of those joints of the foot and of the ankle? A lot of times the answer is next to nothing. Okay, so if you have a car and you have a bad wheel in the car, you're not going to go very far or fast. So you need to do things to stay ahead of that proactively. Obviously, we can make considerations and adjustments if need be reactively. Okay, then C, obviously we all want to gain muscle, lose fat, positive changes in body composition, and that's going to come a lot from what happens in the kitchen, but certainly we need to provide stress for the body. You can never out-train a bad diet, and that's another conversation for another time. Okay, so the qualities that we will look at, and these are just an example of a few. One is strength. It doesn't mean that we're going to be loading the bar with an outrageous amount of weight, but we do need to adhere to the undeniable principle of progressive overload. So even if you just put 2.5 pounds on the bar for 50 weeks on either side of the barbell, you're talking your progression's 250 pounds in a year. That's not going to happen, but we still have to have an intention and a program to be able to be progressive in time so we can continue to grow. Understanding it's not always going to be this nice, smooth, linear progression, but that we're going to have some level of this, some level of undulation where we push and pull with the stressors of life, and then we'll always make it right. So the things that we can load from a strength perspective, in large part, is going to be dependent upon how you move. How can you move so that or how do you move rather, so that we can load you and it be orthopedically safe and sound? And it also has a lot to do with what your goals are. This is just a singular quality that will support a lot of the other qualities as well. Aerobic stuff. This doesn't mean, hey, go run 4 miles on Tuesday. We'll probably program that never, but it doesn't mean that you can't get benefit from doing something that would help with the increased aerobic capacity. You don't really need to hit that, but every 25 days plus or minus 5, but we will have those things taken into consideration with the programming so that we have a very comprehensive plate for you to pull from. And then hypertrophy or just muscle growth, or see the opposite of atrophy. And we'll usually get that through always get that through our volume. So prescribing particular protocols that allows us to have sufficient time under tension so we have the ability for those muscles to grow. The things we're going to look at in kind of your auxiliary and or supplementary training outside of what we would term as like your core exercise, and once again a generalization is that's where you hit your strength. The volume stuff on those auxiliary ones, we're looking at areas that muscles that cross over the joints that are problematic, right? So strengthening glutes, quads, hamstrings, anything with the foot, things around your shoulder, lats, back, to make sure that we have a good posture, as we tend to see a lot of what we would just call kyphosis in time. So postural things are critical. The undulation I talked about a little bit, and that just goes into how do we vary these protocols and how do we vary the exercise selection, because the people who are committed and consistent with their training program, a lot of times, or at least what I've been told and or observed, is that people start to plateau because they're not getting enough undulation, change, and or variation in some of these pieces here. Obviously, we need to be consistent with the movement patterns that we choose to use so we have the ability to load those things, but equally as critical that we have some variety for the spice of training as we go.